Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's still the beginning of February and time to start more seeds. Now, the last thing we're going to start is the red cabbage, and I bought these seeds from Botanical Interests a few years ago. The variety is Red Acres Cabbage, and it's a hybrid too. Again, seeds are small. Here's what they look like. But it's better than those snapdragons. Now I am going to put soil on top of these because they don't need light to germinate. And they're going to germinate in 7 to 12 days. Starting them now, let's see what my notes say. It says 8 to 10 weeks before the last freeze. 11 weeks is perfect. I'm going to plant them outside in the ground early to mid-April. Now the cabbage is going to be mature in 75 to 100 days. I'm growing it for dill salads. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to pot up red cabbage. Now we're going to pot these up into 4-inch pots. Now I have more red cabbage than I can use, so I'm going to go ahead and use these cheaper pots so I can share these with the community. And the cabbage I'm going to keep, I'm going to put in these really sturdy pots that I like to keep for myself. Now the soil I'm going to use is ProMix Organic Garden Potting Soil. Now some of the soil blocks have more than one red cabbage seedling that's germinated. So I'm going to thin, but I'm going to use these scissors because I'm afraid that if I pull up the extras, it's going to damage the roots. So we're going to use these really fine tip scissors. We're going to just leave one seedling in each soil block. Now we sowed these seeds 4 weeks ago. And they germinated really quickly. It only took 4 days. Now, red cabbage germinates best at 70 to 75 degrees. And this furnace room, it's perfect. It tends to run 65 to 75. Now they're going to grow inside under lights for 3 more weeks. Now, mid-March, we're going to start bringing them outside every day for a few hours to get used to the weather, the wind, the sun, and the temperature. Then we're going to plant them out in the garden at the beginning of April. Now they've gotten a little bit leggy, so we're going to put some more soil up around the stem. Now they're going to grow best in a little bit cooler location. So we're going to move them over to the other end of the basement where the room tends to run 55 to 65 degrees, and that's just going to be perfect. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to harden off our red cabbage. Now we're going to want to transplant the cabbage, any head cabbage, red or green, it doesn't matter, 2 to 4 weeks before the last frost. That means we need to start hardening it off 4 to 6 weeks before our last frost. Now I want to start it hardening off in a protected area, so near the house is just perfect. Today, we're only going to leave it outside for 2 hours, but every day we'll increase and give it more time and get it closer and closer to the full sun. And when it's not outside, we're going to leave it here in the kitchen under these lights. If cabbage is exposed consistently to temperatures 44 degrees or below, it can cause it to send up a flower head and bolt. So I'm going to wait every day until it gets to be 50 degrees or above before moving it outside. Now, I started these in soil blocks 5.5 weeks ago, and I potted them up 3 weeks ago. I'm not going to need all these cabbages, so I'm going to give a bunch away for free on a community shelf that we have behind the garage. After I cover these up, I'll show it to you. The net's going to protect it from the digging squirrels. They would love to hide their peanuts in there. I have some seeds I want to give away and put on the community shelf, so come on with me. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out our cabbages. Now in the summer, these blackberries are going to leaf out and fill up this trellis, and that's going to block the heat of the summer sun. So the cabbages is going to do best planted along this side. Now yesterday I saw my first white cabbage butterfly. So this netting is going to protect the cabbages from the butterfly laying their eggs and the caterpillars hatching out and just chewing up the leaves. But let's get it open right now. Now I left one fall cabbage. It lasted through the winter because I want to save seeds. But there hasn't been a net over it for several months, so it might already have some caterpillar eggs in there, and I don't want those sharing the tunnel and spreading the caterpillars to the new cabbages. So we're going to keep it separate. And it's already started sending up its flower stalk. Let me show you. Now these cabbages are 6.5 weeks old. I started them in soil blocks and potted them up 4 weeks ago. Let me show you their big, healthy roots. Now I only need 3 cabbages, and most of these I'm going to give away free to the community. So when we're finished planting, we're going to bring them out to the community shelf. But for now, let's just set them aside. Now I want to space these 12 inches apart. That's going to be equal to the size of this Hori knife. Now each variety of cabbage is going to have a different spacing requirement. These cabbages would really prefer 24 inches apart. That's actually how big that fall cabbage is. But I'm growing in this small space, so I'm just going to put them 12 inches apart. Now see this right here? I'm going to plant this deep, up to the level of the first true leaves. Let me show you again. I'm going to plant it right up to here. Also going to want to firm it in really well. Now, cabbages I'm planting 12 inches apart, and they like their rows to be 24 to 36 inches apart. So if you're growing in a big garden, you can give them more space, but it's small here. So I'm only going to space them 12 inches from the edge of this sidewalk. But between the cabbages and the blackberries, it is about 39 inches. So that's perfect, because I don't plan to plant behind it, because I need to walk back there to harvest the blackberries this summer. Now, cabbage roots are shallow, and they like consistent watering. So if the head is forming and it gets really dry and then you deep water, it's possible it could split. Now if you notice, as I've been digging, I've been cutting out cardboard. Because remember, every fall I chop and drop my old plants and leave the old mulch and sheet mulch with cardboard on top, then add a new layer of mulch. And that holds in the moisture. And for that reason, in the summer, I don't have to water the garden. Now I will water today and until the roots get established, about a week. Now cabbages are heavy feeders. That means they require rich soil. Now I've been building soil for 11 years using this no-dig method. So this soil is already very rich. Now I'm growing these for Dale, my husband's salads. And I'll harvest that middle one first, and I'll give the two on the ends more room to spread out. So we're going to harvest this middle one first. And I'll start harvesting in June. And the cabbage head will keep for several months in the refrigerator. I tend to wrap it in a paper towel and put it in a baggie. I still have my last fall cabbage in the refrigerator. If cabbage is consistently exposed to temperatures below 44 degrees, it's possible it could bolt. Send up a flower head. Now it's 4 weeks before our last freeze, so we're going to go ahead first and cover it with a netting to protect it from the butterflies, and then tonight we'll come back and cover it with fleece. I already have it set up behind. Good afternoon and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to have a cabbage update. Now this is Red Acres cabbage and they are 9 weeks old. I transplanted them 4 weeks ago. Now, since I transplanted these, they've been protected with netting from cabbage worms. But I forgot about slugs, so they have some slug damage. And it happened right after transplanting, within the first few days. And I realized what was going on, and I put on some slug bait, Sluggo, and it stopped it. The middle's growing nice and beautiful and healthy now. But it's time for more Sluggo because the rain has just dissipated it. It is organic, and it won't hurt birds or wildlife. I've already pulled the few tiny weeds I could find. So it's time to get the leaf mulch back on top to prevent more weeds from germinating and to hold in moisture. First, I want to water. Cabbage requires 1 to 2 inches of water a week. Now, the first week after I transplanted it, I did water it well every day until the roots got established. But after that, the spring rains have taken care of it. We've had good supply of rain, not like last year with the drought. Look at that, the first jasmine. This is my neighbor's tree. This is one of my favorite scents. Cabbage is a heavy feeder. You can feed it a fish emulsion every 2 weeks, or like right now, 4 weeks after transplanting, a slow release fertilizer, like a 10-10-10. I don't plan to fertilize my cabbage. This is very rich soil, full of organic matter, and 4 years worth of quail bedding, all broken down. These will be ready to be harvested mid-June. They will store for several months in the refrigerator. I still have one of my fall cabbages in there. Now this is a fall cabbage that I overwintered. I want to collect seeds from it. So I protected it if it got below 25 degrees. And it's starting to flower. Now I've got to protect these cabbages from cabbage worms. So let's get this net closed. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today is June the 15th and it's time for a red cabbage update. Now this variety is Red Acres cabbage and it was transplanted late March. So let's go ahead and open the netting and take a look. These are big, beautiful cabbages. They really look good, and they're starting to head up. Now, they've been protected with this netting from the very beginning, protected from cabbage worms. But for the first few days, I forgot about slugs, and they had slug damage. But I added some Sluggo, and that took care of the issue. So today, we're going to go ahead and add some more because we're still having some cool, wet nights. Now, if you've been feeding your cabbages, now is the time to stop. When they're heading up, you don't want to keep feeding them. You want them to focus on that center core instead of producing more of the big, beautiful side leaves. Now, I don't feed my cabbages because I already have a really rich organic matter in my soil. And because I do a no-till deep mulch method, I've only had to water the first week until the roots got established. And we've also had a cool, wet spring. The only time I've opened the netting is a few times to pull weeds. My persistent weed is morning glories because it'll poke through that mulch. I've also opened the netting for updates. Now that it's open, let me get behind this tunnel to pull some morning glories. Like I said, they are persistent. I've tried, but I can't get rid of them in this garden. The cabbages should be ready to harvest late June, in just a couple of weeks. Now let's get this netting closed before the white cabbage butterflies come back. And this is our fall cabbage going to seed. I protected it all winter. Soon they're going to be ready. Now I'm growing these cabbages for my husband Dale's salad, so I don't need that many, and I'll grow more in the fall. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to harvest our red acres cabbages and last fall's red cabbage seeds. How do I know if the cabbages are ready to be harvested? Well, 3 reasons. Look at the number of days to maturity for the specific variety. Check the center head to see if it's firm, and has the weather changed from cool to hot. Now this variety is mature in 70 to 100 days, and today is its 98th day of growing, so it's time. Now here in north central Maryland, the temperatures have definitely changed. The heat wave, it arrived last week. This netting, it's done a great job protecting the cabbages from the insects. These leaves look so beautiful and healthy. The leaves look so good. I think I'm going to keep them and dehydrate them, grind them, and add them to our green powder. They really look good. Now, Red Acres cabbages are on the small side, 2 to 4 pounds. So let's see what these weigh. Now, how am I going to store these? So you want to leave the outer leaves. Don't take those off. Don't wash them. This isn't required, but I'm going to wrap them in a paper towel. And store them in a baggie. And they'll keep in the refrigerator for months, up to 7 months. Now, in the fall, I left 1 red cabbage, and when it got below 25 degrees this winter, I protected it. And in the spring, it split and sent up multiple flower stalks. And now we have seeds. And I know they're ready to harvest because they're turning brown and they're splitting open. But more importantly, the finch have flocked to it and are gobbling them up. So I filmed a couple of days ago and went ahead and harvested some because I wanted to make sure I got my own share. But there's plenty for the birds. Now let's go ahead and harvest some more. There are so many seeds in each pod that I've got enough. Now we're going to bring these in the house to dry. We're going to leave that plant, and after the birds strip it of the seeds, we'll pull it out. And I also need to go collect those leaves too. Bye-bye. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time to plant out the fall cabbages. This variety is Red Acres cabbage. I'm going to space them 24 inches apart for a good large head size. And I'm going to distance them in rows of 24 to 36 inches because it's really going to leaf out. I'm also spacing them 24 inches from the end of the tunnel because I don't want them up against that netting. I'm giving them more room than I did my spring cabbages. I only gave those 12 inches apart. So I felt like that was a little too crowded. Now these plants are 6 weeks old. I started them from seed under lights in the basement at the end of June. I'm going to want to plant them all the way up to their first set of true leaves. Cabbages are heavy feeders. Every 2 weeks you can give them some fish fertilizer. But my soil is really rich. If you've noticed, I've laid down this cardboard over last year's leaf mulch. And that's going to break down. And I've been doing that over 12 years, building rich, healthy soil. So I don't tend to feed my plants. Cabbages prefer full sun, and in the spring they were planted over there in partial shade. So I'm curious, giving them more space, 24 inches instead of 12, and more sun, I'm curious how it's going to affect their head size. Now you see the yellow sticky papers. These are going to help control whiteflies and gnats. I'm going to see them around a lot more often now that it's getting cool. It's turned chilly overnight. We're also going to use some organic slug, pill bug, and snail control. And yesterday, prepping this area, I found a snail. Here, let me show you. I'm going to have to protect these cabbages from cabbage worms from now until harvest. And if you notice, while I had them hardening off, I also had them protected with a net. Don't want those white cabbage butterflies laying their eggs on even the tiny transplants. Cabbages prefer 1.5 inches of water a week. And for the first week, the first 7 days, you're going to want to water them every day. And I will be topping that cardboard with mulch. I'm going to use fall leaves, so we're going to have to wait a bit. Here in north central Maryland, this is my last chance to plant my fall cabbages. Right now is mid-August, and they're going to be ready to harvest mid-November. Good morning, Judith here, and it's time for a red cabbage update. These acres red cabbage seeds were started indoors under lights at the end of June. I planted them out mid-August. So they've been growing here for about a month. They've been protected with this netting from the very beginning from the white cabbage butterflies, cabbage worms. And it looks like the heads are starting to form in the middle. They're going to be ready to be harvested mid-November. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving and today it's time to harvest our fall red cabbage. But first, let's feed the birds and the squirrels. Let's go get the supplies and empty out the compost. Now this variety is Acres Red Cabbage, planted 3 months ago in mid-August. Netting over cabbages is a must to protect from cabbage worms because I don't want to use chemicals. And this netting protected these cabbages when they were small transplants from a really bad hailstorm back in August. Luckily, there was no damage, but you will see some tiny holes in the netting. Okay, let's get this open so we can harvest. Cabbage seeds need to be started indoors under lights. So even though these cabbages have been growing for 3 months, the seeds were actually started 5 months ago, and they grew indoors for 2 months before I transplanted them. So these are a 75 to 100 day variety, but that means days to maturity start after they're transplanted, not from when you sow the seeds. So any seeds that you have to start indoors, the days to maturity on the seed packet is from when you transplant them outdoors. Now, these are actually, let me check my notes, 106 days old. Any damaged leaves, I'm not going to save. Now the spring cabbages that we harvested in the summer, most of the big leaves were usable. But these have some slug damage, so I'm going to break off the damaged leaves. Any good leaves we'll keep. We'll add those to the compost. Those leaves we're going to save and dehydrate and add to our greens powder. Now this cabbage has done better than our spring cabbage for 2 reasons. One, they're planted where they get more sun. Now right now this area doesn't get any sun in the fall, but in the summer it got full sun. The ones planted in the spring on the other side were in partial shade. And the fall cabbages we spaced 2 feet apart, where the spring cabbages we only spaced a foot apart. So if your cabbage heads are small, try giving them more sun and more space. Stem is really thick. Look at that. But that's good. And this one has better leaves on the outside that we're going to save. Okay, one more to harvest. I'm really satisfied with that. Those are a good size, and those are going to last for a good 5 months in the fridge. We mainly use them for my husband Dale's salads. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.